Take a look at some basic limit questions as x approaches infinity, and try to remember some of the rules that are good to keep on top of our mind. So in our first example here, I see the limit as x approaches infinity of 3x plus 2 over 9x minus 6. And one thing that we want to focus on is what's the highest power in my numerator and what's the highest power in my denominator. And if they're equal, from class, you should have gathered that we have a nice shortcut where I'm going to take the the coefficient of the highest power in the numerator over the coefficient of the highest power in the denominator, and again, always simplify, and I'm going to get 1/3. So the limit of this function as I approach infinity, as x approaches infinity, is 1/3. And I can use the same rule in my next one, right? The highest power in my numerator is 3, and the highest power in my denominator is 3. And so the limit is going to be the ratio of their coefficients. So I'm going to have 4/5 for the limit here. Next, I go down, and I might be quick to say, oh, wait, the answer is going to be something different, or the process I can use is different. But always make sure you simplify, right? I'm only using these rules once I've simplified. Instead, I might be quick to say, oh, the denominator's power is higher, but again, always simplify. So I'm going to come here and distribute, and you could distribute this all out, but really what we really care about is what's the coefficient of the highest power. So when I do x squared times x squared, I'm going to get x to the 4th, and there's no there's a coefficient, right? There's a 1 in front of each, so we could write it out, though we don't have to. I am going to have 3 other terms, right, that I could combine to be a trinomial here, but what I really care about, like we said earlier, is what's the highest power in the denominator and the highest power in the numerator, or vice versa. So I'm looking at 1 in my numerator, and the coefficient there is 6 in my denominator, so the limit of this function is going to be 1/6. And then if I continue along to my next example here, it's going to be a different rule because I have a difference in the powers now. They're not equal, right? Before we had x to the 4th and x to the 4th, or x to the 3rd and x to the 3rd, x to the 1st, x to the 1st. Here, the numerator, right? The numerator has the higher power, x to the 5th. So now we have a different rule. If the numerator's power is higher than anything in the denominator, well, that means my limit is going to be infinity, right? My numerator is growing faster and faster, and the denominator can't keep up, and it's getting smaller, right? So I have infinity as my limit. And again, is infinity really a limit? No, right? It's growing unbounded. It's getting bigger and bigger, but we like to use the symbol for infinity to say there is no limit. It's getting larger and larger. And then if I look at the last example, which is our third case when we're kind of using these shortcuts for when x is approaching infinity, I look at my powers, I see x to the 5th and I see x to the 6th, and this time it's that third case of what happens when your denominator is getting larger faster than your numerator, right? The denominator has the largest power. Well, in that case, if the denominator is getting larger faster, well, your limit is going to be 0, right? The limit of this function here is going to be 0 because as x is getting larger and larger, the denominator is outpacing that numerator, right? And I'm going to eventually approach 0. So the limit of this is 0. Hope that helps.